Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Ask an Expert. Tom Malero here, Marketing Manager and Coatings Expert for Pettit Paint. I'd first like to start off with thanking you all for all your questions. I sent out an email yesterday and another 100 or so questions, so appreciate you all participating. We have a lot of really good topics to talk about today. One of the biggest topics that has now kind of dominated the questions over the last few weeks has been specific to our Pettit Protect. Our Pettit Protect is our two-part epoxy barrier coat. So we're going to really dig deep into Pettit Protect in particular to start off this Q&A, and then we're going to hop into your questions. Like I said, there was about 30 questions just on Pettit Protect, so just for the sake of flipping through pages, I kind of consolidated all of them. So I'm going to hop right into what is Pettit Protect, why do you use it, why is it important, how do you apply it, best finishes, best practices, what is the mix ratio, how do I keep the container clean, how do I keep all my materials clean, things like that. So we're going to talk really specifically about Pettit Protect. We'll get started right now on that. One of the most frequently asked questions is, why do you recommend at least 2 coats for a barrier coat? And it's a great question. There's a lot of science actually behind why you do at least 2 coats, and it really comes down to mill thickness. What you're trying to achieve is an overall mill thickness of at least 8 dry mills. We preferably really like to see 10 to 12, but really you need at least 8. So as a demo, so instead of mixing up a bunch of epoxies in my living room here, I figured I'd roll out some Pettit Protect onto some pieces of glass. And the reason why I picked glass is I'm going to show you what just this Pettit Protect is applied with a 3/8 snap roller over a smooth surface. And this is really the real reason why you want to use at least 2 coats. You could see, if you shine a flashlight through here, well, it really looks like you have really good mill thickness overall, but then as you shine a light on it, you can really see you missed a lot of spots. Or if you didn't miss a lot of spots, because it is a paint, there is solvent in there, as it flashes out, what's left behind are the solids. So if you apply Pettit Protect with a 3/8 snap roller, which is recommended, you apply it at 6 mils wet, it dries to about 4 mils, and with 1 coat you can see the inconsistency in the finish. So when you put the second coat on, again, same application tool, 3/8 snap roller, you can see how now you can't see the flashlight through the coating. There are systems out there from Pettit, from our competitors, that recommend or say that you could apply 1 coat as a primer coat. You absolutely can do that, and it's a good system if you're just looking to promote adhesion. So if you're looking to promote adhesion from the gel coat to your bottom paint, it's a great system. But you do not get any barrier protection in 1 coat. You do get a little bit of mill thickness, but you really, again, you need that 8 to 12 mils of dry film thickness to give you an appropriate barrier coat. So that's a little visual for you. Let's talk about rollers here for a second. What you see here are 2 rollers. One is a 3/8 snap roller. This is your typical inexpensive roller. It probably comes in a twin pack. You probably pick up 2 for $5 or $6. And then you have a 3/16 mohair roller, which we really recommend for like Vivid, Black Widow, Hydrocoat, our multi-season ablative coatings to give you a nicer finish. Now, the question gets asked all the time, well, when you apply a barrier coat with a 3/8 snap roller, you kind of don't get the greatest finish. Well, it's true. What you're trying to achieve here with the 3/8 snap roller is trying to get the most amount of mill thickness on in the least amount of coats. When you do that, the drawback is your finish. Now, can you get a nicer finish? Apply Pettit Protect with a thinner nap roller or a shorter nap roller and still get your overall mill thickness? Well, the question is, or the answer is absolutely. Instead of using 2 coats of Pettit Protect with the 3/8 roller, just double the amount of coats with your 3/16. So if we do a little bit of math here, a 3/8 nap roller is about 6 mils. So you're going to put 6 mils of wet film thickness down with a 3/8 nap roller. You're going to put down 3 wet mils with a 3/16 nap roller because it's half the thickness of a 3/8. When you do that, it's important to make sure you put twice as many coats of Pettit Protect on with the 3/16 nap roller. Now, that sounds like sounds like a lot of extra work, right? There's multiple ways to skin the cat. You can apply 4 applications with the short nap roller to get a smoother finish. You could also thin out the Pettit Protect with the 3/8 nap roller, and you'll still get a smoother surface, but it still won't be as nice as a 3/16. Now, a lot of folks go, can't I just apply 2 or 3 coats of Pettit Protect with a 3/8 nap roller and then sand it back with, say, 80 grit or 120 grit, something like that? Well, you absolutely can, but if you're unfamiliar with epoxies, they kind of sand like concrete. They're very difficult to sand. Now, if you have a random orbital or a DA or something like that, obviously that'll make a lot faster work and it'll be a lot easier on you in terms of elbow grease. So you always have that option. If you're going to go that way, make sure you're always using a vacuum attachment to your sander, because you never want to get sanding residue in the boatyard. So that's important, or a couple of things regarding application tools for Pettit Protect. That's rollers. Now, obviously, there's always some cutting in around bow thrusters, around through-hole fittings, around outboard motor brackets, trim tabs, things like that. And I see it time after time, even at our boatyards. A lot of folks will go and grab a really expensive, natural bristle brush like a badger hair or something like that. Well, to be honest with you, you're really wasting a really good brush for Pettit Protect. You're never going to get the Pettit Protect back out of this brush, no matter what you do. No matter how much epoxy thinner you add to it, no matter how long you let it soak. It's a 2-part epoxy primer. The brush is going to be thrown away. So save yourself some money. Don't ever use an expensive brush when it comes to barrier coats. Use an inexpensive chip brush. You could buy these for $1 or $2 a piece. Every time you're playing with 2-part epoxy primer, you're throwing your tools away in terms of the application tools. You're throwing the brush away. You're throwing the roller away. Now, there are some old school folks out there that will go and take the roller and try to save the roller, and they'll put it in the freezer, and it'll stop the curing process. Epoxies, like Pettit Protect here, really stop curing below 50 degrees. So you can extend the life of your epoxy or the life of the roller by doing that. My question's always been, if you're using a $1 or $2 roller, and listen, I'm as cheap as they come, right? I'm very fiscally responsible. I don't like wasting money. But when it comes to a $2 roller and the possibility of having an issue down the road by putting partially cured Pettit Protect on the bottom, or rolling out the Pettit Protect and it's not, you're putting on it 12 mils in one spot, and you come back and you put more Pettit Protect on top and you have a solvent entrapment issue. I don't know. For me, the $2 roller is much easier to throw this away than trying to save the $2 roller. One other thing to talk about in terms of rollers is you never want to use a cardboard core roller with any marine grade coating. If it's a Hydrocoat, if it's a Pettit Protect, if it's easy epoxy or bottom paint, you always want to make sure you go with something with a phenolic core. A phenolic core is a composite type material that won't be eaten away by solvents. I see it happen a lot in the boatyard. Someone unfamiliar with painting marine grade coatings, they're used to painting coatings in their home, and they'll try to use a really, really, really inexpensive, 25-cent or 50-cent cardboard cord roller. You might get away with that around the house, but you're not going to get away with that with a marine coating. The solvents in the marine coatings will eventually eat that roller, and you'll just wind up going through rollers like they're going out of style. So always use a phenolic core roller when using a marine grade coating. Looks like we might have some questions here. Yeah, Jim Walsh, Red Tree Fooler. That's a great one. I kind of like Worcester Super Doozies. The reason why, this is a lint-free roller. If you're really looking to have it look as cosmetically pleasing as possible, when you use the inexpensive roller like this, you always get a lot of hairs that come off. I mean, it just falls apart very easily, especially when you really start working it. Something like a Super Doozy is shed resistant. You won't have those little hairs coming off and getting into your paint finish. Sure, maybe on a primer you're not too concerned about it, but I know if you start using a really nice bottom paint like Vivid or Black Widow, the last thing you want to do is spread a $300 gallon of paint or $250 gallon of paint with a really cheap roller and then having those roller hairs come off in the finish. So definitely spending the extra little bit. This is probably 20% more expensive than the really cheap 3/8 snaps, but it's a really good roller. So that kind of goes over a few things regarding Pettit Protect. We talked about finish. Let's talk about overcoat times. One of the questions here, or two of the questions here were, what's the max recoat time when using Pettit Protect barrier coat? So there's a couple different dry times we talk about. There's recoating Pettit Protect to Pettit Protect, and then there's overcoating Pettit Protect with bottom paint. And they are different in terms of timing, hours, things like that. We have this application guide for Pettit Protect. We have it printed. We have it on our website, pettitpaint.com. If you're unfamiliar with barrier coating, I at least advise you go on pettitpaint.com. Under the technical bulletins portion or at the Pettit Protect page on the website. Pull this up. It's PDF. You can print it. You can just look at it. On page 4 here, and I could easily go by every single dry time here, but there's this really easy chart here. And it talks about time to recoat with Pettit Protect, time to recoat with anti-fouling. Now, I talked about infrared thermometers. I talked about them on week 1. I talked about them last week when we were doing our epoxy demos. I will now again stress the importance of an infrared thermometer again. Infrared thermometers, you just shoot it onto the substrate. It tells you the temperature. Again, you can pick this up for 20 bucks. Why this is important, all dry times, if it's a Pettit Paint dry time, a competitor's dry time, a home improvement product dry time, it's all based upon substrates. So what is a substrate? Substrate is the actual material you're applying the coating to. All these dry times are based upon the substrate temperature. So when you see 90 degrees, that's 90 degrees substrate temperature. When you see 70 degrees, it's 70 degrees substrate temperature. Let's talk about overcoat windows for Pettit Protect to Pettit Protect to start with. In between coats of Pettit Protect, regardless of the temperature, anything over 50 degrees, you have 60 days in between coats. 60 days, 2 months, okay? So huge overcoat window from Pettit Protect to Pettit Protect. If you go past 60 days, you can then sand it with 80 grit and apply a fresh coat of Pettit Protect, and you got another 60 days to put another coat of Pettit Protect if you had to. I can't think of an instance why you need to, but in case you had to. in regards to Pettit Protect to bottom paint, this is super crucial. What you'll find on the back of the can and on our application guide here is at 70 degrees, you have 5 to 8 hours to get bottom paint on. We could talk paint for the rest of our lives here. Whenever you're talking about chemical adhesion, so chemical bond, you know, raw barrier coat to fresh bottom paint, you want that coating to be tacky. Our competitors say put in a thumbprint and that's good. Yeah, same with us. I really prefer thumbnail. So if you could push your thumbnail into the Pettit Protect and it's tender enough, obviously wearing gloves, it's tender enough to leave an indent in the Pettit Protect but not come back onto your thumb, I personally prefer that in terms of tack between Pettit Protect and bottom paint, based on the sole fact that if you could put your thumbprint into it, it's still very, very, very tender. And if you're pushing paint into it, you could, if you're pushing really hard, well, you could tear or push the coating aside, or you could trap in solvents. If you're using a really solvent-rich bottom paint, you could really trap in those solvents. So I always recommend thumbnail. Our barrier coat is very unique. We have the only barrier coat on the market that you can actually apply a water-based coating over, like Hydrocoat or Neptune, during that tack phase. Meaning, while it's still tacky. Other barrier coats on the market, they want you to let it cure, sand it back, and apply water-based bottom paint. Pettit Protect is specially formulated that you can apply Hydrocoat or Neptune over it without having to sand. You could do the tack window. That's a very, very, it's a huge advantage over some other products on the market. One of the questions that came over yesterday, I believe, was from Glenn. His question was, how do I keep the can clean if I'm doing a small job and I bought a gallon and I'm only doing, 6-8 ounces at a time? Wonderful question. We get the question all the time. There are, at marine stores, marine retailers, boat yards, there's multiple manufacturers out there making plastic pour spout lids that will clip onto the top of a gallon. Now this is a quart. I believe there's one or two manufacturers out there for quarts, but this is mostly for gallons because, quarts most of the time you're just going to mix the whole thing. If you're interested in what that product is specifically, you could Google it and just put, paint can pour spout lid, and you'll get a bunch of results on Google, right? If you're really interested on a specific link, email us, marketing@pettitpaint.com. I'll shoot you over the link. We don't manufacture them, but there are plenty of companies out there that do, and we can send you a link and get you information on how to buy those pour spout lids. Super easy to use, clip onto the top, has a pour spout. You pour the base out. The catalysts, you could do that on our the gallon kit, because the gallon kit is the same width as the tall gallon for our Pettit Protect, so you can use that same pour spout. Make sure you're cleaning the pour spout if you're going to do that. But that's a really useful tool if you're trying to break up gallons and not use the gallon all at one time. In terms of mill thickness, we touched upon that before with rollers. There are these mill thickness gauges. You could buy these online. You could pick them up at most paint supply stores. This is super important when doing barrier coats. Again, we're going for an overall mill thickness of 8 to 12 mils, and that's dry film thickness. In terms of wet film thickness, what you want to do is make sure you use the wet film thickness gauge. And the way how you use this is you actually push it into the coating and you pull it off. You then go over to a flat, piece of cardboard or a flat sheet of something you have kicking around, push the mil thickness gauge into that material, whatever it may be. Again, you're pushing epoxy onto it, so make sure it's something you can throw away or clean up easy. And what you're going to see is you're going to see these little dots either appear or not on your substrate. So again, we're looking for at least 6 wet films or wet film thickness of Pettit Protect per coat. So this is a really great tool. You can pick these up for a few bucks. Super useful whenever you're doing a lot of painting or priming. These are really great. So mil thickness gauges, very important when doing a barrier coat. I believe that covers all the questions on Pettit Protect. Let me just see if there's any questions popping up here on our broadcast. It doesn't look like it right now. Okay. So we're going to move on from Pettit Protect. Again, any questions? Please feel free to send them over either via Facebook Live or marketing@pettitpaint.com, and we'd be happy to answer those for you. The next question, or the next product, we have a lot of questions last week and also this week, is basically, tell me about your miracle product, Rustlok. Rustlok's actually one of my favorite Pettit products, and for a couple reasons. In addition to being in the marine industry my entire life, I'm also into automotive repair. I'm very handy. I use all of our products, on a regular basis. Rustlok 6980 can be used all over the place. It can be used on steel, could be used on ferrous metals. It could be used on aluminum. It's a super, super, super universal primer that works extremely well. It bonds tenaciously to whatever it touches. So let's talk about safety when it comes to Rustlok, and then we'll get into its applications. We had a customer call a few years ago, the tech line, and he goes, I'm getting married tomorrow. I got a really bizarre question. I was using a Rustlok yesterday. How do I get it off my hands? I wasn't using gloves. Joey, our customer service rep at the time, basically said, sir, if it's already dried, it takes about 2 weeks to come off. And the customer says, well, what do you mean by 2 weeks? It's a very permanent coating. Permanent on skin, permanent on metal, permanent on whatever you touch with Rustlok. Whenever you're using Rustlok, you have to wear protective clothing. Wear jeans that you could throw away, wear a shirt you could throw away. I always forget, wear inexpensive shoes that, your painting shoes. And the most important thing, wear gloves. This is a super permanent coating. So that's safety. In regards to finish, the question we get all the time is, what does it look like? Well, I quickly threw this together this morning right before the demo, or right before the Q&A. Rustlok looks a lot like a freshly galvanized finish. You can see it here on the can. I was in a rush, so the can got a little messy this morning. It looks like a freshly galvanized finish. What are some uses for Rustlok? Any type of corroded or rusted steel is great for Rustlok. You don't even have to remove the rust. Now, if it's loose rust, absolutely, you want to remove scale. Scrape it, chip it, grind it, however you want to do it. Get any loose rust off. If it's tightly adhered rust, all you have to do is clean the surface and then apply at least 3 coats of Rustlok. Rustlok's very thin in its nature. It's a urethane. But that's what makes it so permanent. It really seeps and soaks into the coating that it's being applied to. You could apply this on trailers. You could apply it to the undercarriage of your car or truck, fenders. You can apply it to a forklift. You could apply it to a travel lift. You could apply it to the ramp on your travel lift. there's millions of uses for Rustlok. For example, I mean, this was the coating or the finish of the metal before I put the Rustlok on. I didn't even clean it up. I just, for the demo reasons, I just wanted to show you what a rusty piece of metal looked like with Rustlok applied to it. So it's a really great finish. I restore cars and trucks and things like that. My last truck, I had a 65 Chevy C10, rotten floorboards, rusty frame. Obviously the frame wasn't shot, it was just crusty. Removed any loose rust, wire brushed it, cleaned it with our 120 brushing thinner. 120 brushing thinner is a mixture of mineral spirits, xylene, and xylol. Fast drying, works really well at cleaning the metals or cleaning anything you're working with. And then put on 2 or 3 coats of Rustlok. We see Rustlok getting used all the time on snow plows. If you work for a municipality or you have your own business or your own snow plow that you clean your own home with, or clean up snow around the house. Rustlok's not only a marine grade product, or not only used in the marine industry, you can use Rustlok wherever you want. Fantastic product, really great finish. You can leave Rustlok the way it is, so it'd have that nice shiny silver finish, or you could hot coat it with our easy epoxy topside polyurethane. You could spray a aerosol enamel over the top of it. You can apply a Pettit Protect over the top of it. So Rustlok is a super, super, super generic, very useful primer for all kinds of uses. So really, really great product. You'll find tons of use for it around the home. We sell it in quarts and gallons. I highly recommend buying quarts unless you have a large project. This product bonds so tenaciously, if you don't clean the lid of the can very well, it will weld the lid onto the can. So from a safety standpoint, always wear gloves. From a product use standpoint, always clean out the rim so that you can put the lid back on and not worry about it welding onto the can. Super useful product. One of my favorites that we manufacture. Give it a shot. We'll be posting some Rustlok pictures over the next few days. If not, dig into our feed a little bit. I'm always talking about Rustlok. Really great product, super useful just about anywhere. Henry, we got a new question here. Can you walk me through the process? 2-year-old fiberglass hull, never bottom painted, planning on Pettit barrier coat epoxy gray, then vivid white. Wonderful question. Any hull, any fiberglass hull, regardless of its age, if it's 2 years, if it's 30 years, there are always mold release waxes locked in the gel coat, regardless of the age, okay? The most important thing to start in this process is dewaxing the hull. We make a product called 92 BioBlue Hull Surface Prep. How you do this system is you take the 92 BioBlue, you shake it up really well, you pour it into a paint tray, you take a short nap roller, 3/16, and you roll the BioBlue on the boat. Obviously below the tape line, wherever you're going to be painting. Take the BioBlue, roll out a 5 by 5 foot section at a time. Why? If you go out and roll it on the whole boat, it's going to dry on you. It's a water-based product. If it dries, it's not the biggest deal. It's not like it's a permanent coating. It'll still come off. It'll take a little bit more work. But just stick to a 5 by 5 foot section at a time. When I used to prep boats, I would actually take a Sharpie and I would just dot a 1 foot by 1 foot section at a time, or 2 foot by 2 foot, whatever you want to do. That way I didn't get ahead of myself or lose track of where I was. BioBlue being a water-based coating, when you apply it, it's blue in color. You'll see a light film. But when you go to remove it, there's no residue or anything left behind. So you don't really know where you've been except for a couple telltales. One, when you spray water onto the gel coat to remove the BioBlue, it will leave a dull frosty finish. it will look significantly different than an unprepped section above the tape line or above the water line. Dull, frosty finish. The second thing is you will see the water on the surface streak instead of bead like a freshly waxed car, or above the water line where the water might have splashed above it, you'll see it bead up. That's the wax on the surface. If it's been properly de-waxed with BioBlue, the water will just streak off. You want to see that. If it still beads up, you missed that section, go back with the BioBlue and the Scotch-Brite pads and clean it again. You can use sheets of Scotch-Brite pads or nylon scuff pads, or you could get 6-inch pads like this, round, that you could actually put onto your sander and do it by hand. If doing that, it is water-based, make sure you're using a DC type sander or pneumatic sander. Very important. After you work the BioBlue into the surface, hose it off, clean it all off, make sure there's no residue. You then want to sand it with 80 grit. I referenced this material last week. It's a material made by Mirka. It's called Abernet. I personally prefer this. We don't have a relationship with Mirka or anything. I just personally prefer it because of the technology. I'm a technology guy. I like new. I like the latest and greatest. Sure, there's plenty of things that are old school that work extremely well, but I prefer this product when it comes to sanding for a couple reasons. It's like a screen. They say it's like 98% effective in removing sanding residue. We only have one set of lungs in our lives. Always use a respirator. Always use a sander that has a vacuum hooked up to it to extract the sanding residue. This will also help you from just pushing the residue around the boat and thinking that you sanded a spot when you really didn't. So these Abernet sanding discs are really great. When you're sanding, you want to use 80 grit. On the back of the pad or on the box that you buy, it will say 80, P80 or 80 grit. Make sure you use 80 grit. Come back, clean the hull, removing any residue, any of the gel coat sanding residue. You can use a vacuum, wet dry vac, the same vacuum you were extracting the dust from the surface via the sander. You can use compressed air. You can bring an air compressor out there and blow it off. At a boatyard, don't do that. You'll wind up blowing residue on somebody else's boat. At home, you could do that. What a lot of folks do is they use our 120 brushing thinner. Take some, always using fresh rags. If you clean an area, use either paper towels or rags, and always frequently either clean or turn them over. You never want to just keep pushing the residue back onto the boat or into the sanding scratches. But use the 120 brushing thinner and rags and paper towels to remove the sanding residue. Then come back, mix up your Pettit Protect. One thing I didn't talk about before is the induction period. All two-part barrier coats have a specific induction period. There's not a two-part barrier coat on the market that doesn't have an induction period. Why is the induction period important? When does it start? The induction period only starts when you have completely mixed the catalyst with the base. Let me restate that and reiterate it. That process only starts when you have completely mixed the two together. So it's not when you first pour the catalyst into the base. That's not when the clock starts. It's when it's completely mixed into the base and it looks like two components put together. It looks like regular paint. You will see no streaks. You'll see no discoloration. It'll look like the two are well mixed together. That's when the induction period starts. That is a minimum of 15 minutes depending on temperature. If it's very cold, it could be pushed up to a half hour. Again, they'll say that on the can, but you can always reference the Pettit Protect guide for that induction time period. So, induction period. You've now de-waxed, you've now sanded, you now have to mix the barrier coat together. Take part A, mix it to part B, mix it completely, then start the induction period timer. Again, at least 15 minutes depending on temperature. You can then, after the induction period is complete, pour it into the paint tray. That induction period is important because it's locking and linking the catalyst to the base. We get complaints once in a while saying, oh, the product didn't cure right, it's still sticky, it's not completely cured. And we ask, well, did you wait the induction time? And most of the time the response is, what's an induction time? So clearly they didn't wait. Very important, 2-part barrier coats. You got to wait the 15 minutes before you apply the barrier coat. So apply your 2 coats of Pettit Protect barrier coat. Here it looks like you're applying vivid white. Henry, here is a tip for you. If you're going to apply Pettit Protect, make sure the last coat is Pettit Protect in white. We make Pettit Protect in white and gray. The reason why I'm saying that, the gray is very dark. It's definitely on the darker side of the gray spectrum. It'll cost you an additional coat to overcoat the gray with white vivid if you don't make that white, or if you don't make the last coat of barrier coat white. So my suggestion, apply a coat of gray barrier coat for your first coat, apply Pettit Protect white as your second coat, and then apply your vivid white. That will save you an additional coat because you'll get better coverage with a white bottom paint over a white barrier coat. So that will definitely help you out. Jim Skinner, can Rustlok be used underwater? Absolutely. You do not want to apply it underwater like, say, our epoxies, like Splash Zone, but absolutely. Rustlok is used on bridge abutments, it's used on bulkheads, it's used on docks, it's used all over the place underwater. If it's going to be applied underwater, or if it's going to be used underwater, at least apply 3 coats. More coats the better, the more coats it'll last longer, but at least apply 3 coats if the intended use is for below the water with Rustlok. Another question here. Is the process any different for a hard bottom coats like SR21? Chuck, great question. If you're referring to the dewaxing, sanding, and barrier coat portion, no. All the same. You could also hot coat SR21 over Pettit Protect. I will caution you, whenever you're using SR21, one of the reasons why you're using SR21 is because you're looking for a racing finish. If you over apply Pettit Protect or don't apply it nicely, in thin coats and thin the product out, you will have a difficult time with SR21 laying nice and flat over Pettit Protect, because Pettit Protect can be very bumpy if you use a 3/8 nap roller. If you're using SR21, and I refer this to all of our applicators all the time who use SR21, it's not the greatest method because there is extra labor involved, but again, the reason why you're using SR21 is because you're looking for a racing finish. Whenever you get done with the Pettit Protect, come back and sand it with 150 grit, and then apply SR21 over the top. That is the best way you'll get a super smooth racing finish out of SR21. Let's see. Is it possible to bottom paint in stages? I want to use Pettit Protect and Hydrocoat Echo on a 30-foot boat on a trailer. I could do a side at a time, lifting it up enough to do so a side at a time. Scott, wonderful question, and the answer is absolutely. The biggest tip here is, if you're going to do one side at a time, do not do the entire process all the way to the keel. What do I mean by that? You could take the barrier coat all the way down to the keel, but leave the Hydrocoat Echo up a little bit. Why do I say that? Because when you come back on the other side with the Pettit Protect and the prep and all that, if you went hard to the middle of the keel and you put Hydrocoat Eco and Pettit Protect right to the middle of the keel, you're now going to have a hard time butting up here. You're now going to have zero tolerance and no room for error. So leave your Pettit Protect open for about 6 inches on this side, so that when you come back over and you start prepping the other side and start rolling the Pettit Protect barrier coat, you're now locking Pettit Protect to Pettit Protect. You're not possibly rolling Pettit Protect over Hydrocoat Eco and creating an issue. So yes, you can absolutely do that. Just be careful. Plan ahead. Do not apply both coats all the way down to the keel. That's a wonderful question. Bernie, is Rustlok a high temperature resistant product? It's a very open-ended question. What type of temperatures are we discussing? 1,000 degrees is a lot different than 200 degrees. So let's talk about that. Ben Burleson, can I get one of those signs behind you? It's a pretty slick sign, isn't it? Reach out to us, marketing@pettitpaint.com. We don't give these away to just everyone. They are very special and important to us in particular. This gives you a lot of notoriety in terms of how you apply the coating. If you're a yard, if you've been certified by our reps in the field. The only way to get one of these is actually if you have one of our reps come and actually certify you and your boatyard for applying our products the correct way. We could talk about boatyard practices. Maybe that's a topic for a couple weeks from now. But to get one of these signs, you have to be a Pettit certified applicator, certified by one of our outside sales reps. Looks like that covers the questions for right now for Facebook Live. I'll keep going with other questions here. That goes over Rustlok. Pat from Southern Maine, vivid burnishing techniques. Pat, very good question. We get that question a lot. I'm not cheating right here. I'm just using this as reference so you know what kind of materials are available for you. On our website, pettitpaint.com, under both the Vivid and Black Widow pages, you will find this technical bulletin on burnishing both Vivid or Black Widow. I spoke about this a couple weeks ago. There is no right or wrong way how to burnish. There's different finishes for different folks. A lot of folks are happy with just wetting the bottom and then kind of wet sanding with a Scotch-Brite pad and taking down any roller stipple. 8 out of 10 people are completely fine with that. They like that finish. It takes away any imperfections on the finish. There are those folks, and you'll find photos on our Facebook page or our product pages on our website, where you get a mirror-like finish. To do that, there's multiple steps. It usually starts out with that same wet sanding type process with a Scotch-Brite pad, but then it gets stepped up. You'll find on our Facebook page there's Black Widow dark blue, there's some photos on there, Black Widow black, where it has a mirror-like finish. And how to get there, again, clean the surface very well, do your wet sanding with your Scotch-Brite pad. You're then going to come back with 400 grit sandpaper and do the entire bottom. That's going to knock down a lot of material. You're then going to wet sand it again with 1200 grit. And then take it one step further with 3000 to 5000 grit. It's a multi-step process, but if you're really looking to get that high-performance racing finish, if you're really looking to significantly improve fuel efficiency, we have a lot of OEMs doing that right now. That's the process, and that's detailed on this technical bulletin. One big thing when you're talking about burnishing, it's always easier if the finish is smoother to start with. So always make sure you're using short nap rollers and thinning the product. That'll help you a long way with the burnishing process. Bernie, on rusted exhaust risers. Absolutely. Rustlok's used for that all day, every day. Great question. Can you use Rustlok as a metal primer, then apply with a finished color coat? Lisa, absolutely. Great question. Depends on the substrate. Steel, aluminum, things like that, no problem at all. Trying to think, finishes you don't want to use Rustlok on. You don't want to use Rustlok on fiberglass. I probably don't have to say that, but there's some folks out there that have tried it in the past. But But yeah, you can use Rustlok as a metal primer, then apply a finish coat on top. No doubt about it. That takes care of Pat's question. Bobby from Pope's Landing, what's the difference between varnish and urethane in a marine setting? So that's a great question, Bobby, and I got a couple examples here. Next week, if you tune in, I'm going to spend an entire hour just on treating wood and our different varnishes. What you see here are two of our more popular varnishes. Flagship is a spar varnish. Captain's Ultra Clear is a urethane varnish. Why do we offer two? We get this question all the time. We actually offer 6 different varnishes. The difference between the two specifically is, in terms of technology, a spar varnish will take longer to dry, but it takes longer for it to break down and only breaks down per coat. What do I mean by that? If you apply 6 coats of Flagship high build varnish, what happens is over time, and this goes for any wood finish, only the outside coat breaks down. Why is that a big advantage? Because you don't have to remove the entire coating. You don't have to remove the outside layer. So scuffing with 120 or 240 grit will burn down that outside layer. It'll give you a good anchor pattern to the existing coatings, and you could just brush on a fresh coat of Flagship high build varnish. Captain's Ultra Clear, which is different from regular Captain's Varnish 1015. Captain's Varnish 1015 it's a spar varnish, so it is that traditional technology. The advantage of a urethane is its faster dry times. You could apply more coats of urethane in the same amount of time as you would with a spar varnish. The disadvantage is when a spar varnish breaks down, it doesn't break down by coat. It breaks down the entire coating. So if you have 6 coats of urethane varnish on there, it breaks down all 6 coats at once. And when that happens, you'll have to reapply all coats. So spar varnish takes longer to dry, but will only break down a coat at a time. Urethane varnish dries faster, but all coats break down, and you'll need to replace all coatings instead of just the outside exterior coating. Those are the 2 differences. There are others. Application is different for both, and we'll talk about that in depth next week when I break down all 5 or 6 of our varnishes, our easy wood sealer, and things like that. Bobby, great question. Frank from Long Island Sound. I have a 10-foot dinghy I'd like to bottom paint. It's never been painted. It's a fiberglass bottom. How do I prep? Frank, we talked about this before. Same method for dewaxing. Dewax with BioBlue, scuff sand, primer, and then either Hydrocoat or Neptune. As he said, what product would you prefer? I prefer water-based. So I gave him 2 options. I said you have Neptune, HRT, or you have Hydrocoat. That question comes up a few times in here. What's the difference between Neptune and Hydrocoat? Neptune HRT, 25% copper, single season. Hydrocoat, 40% copper, multi-season. Multi-season, you don't have to apply every year. Single season, you're applying every year. So Frank responded back to me. He's going to go with Hydrocoat. Bob from Cape Cod. Question is, what is your best ablative bottom paint? Our best ablative bottom paint is Ultima SR60. That's a bit of a loaded question because you can look at this question 2 different ways. What is your best? What is best for me? Now, up in Cape Cod, Ultima SR60, it's a phenomenal product. It works wonderful from Maine all the way down to Florida and California and up the Pacific Northwest and down to the Caribbean. Phenomenal product. Bob, in your neck of the woods, it's probably really overkill. You really don't need 60% copper. You don't need the 2% ergol. Waters up there are pretty cold. I recommended either our Odyssey or Hydrocoat. It's usually fine up there. Would absolutely love for you to buy Ultima SR60. You will absolutely love it. You probably won't have to apply paint for 2-3 years because the product is so effective. But you just have to ask yourself, what is your boating budget? If you're on a budget, the best product is most likely the most expensive, right? It may not be the best product for you. Certainly if your budget allows it, great. SR60 is a wonderful product. But you probably don't need that in Cape Cod. Hydrocoat or Odyssey HD are probably both great alternatives for you. Rob says he boats in a lake. What should I use for my boat floor? So I followed up with Rob because I had to ask the question, well, what is the substrate? Substrate was everyday gel coat. The reason why I had to ask that question, well, because aluminum obviously gets treated differently than fiberglass, right? So in terms of prep, always bio blue, Scotch brake pad, sand, clean up sanding residue. If you're going to apply Easy Dex, which is the product I'd recommend for a boat floor, Easy Dex is a polyurethane with a built-in non-skid. It actually has a poly bead in it. I spoke about that a couple weeks ago. Why is that different from competitors' products? Competitors' products really use aluminum oxide. It's actual metal little shavings. What happens is if you roll that out thick or if you roll it out over an uneven surface, because it's metal, it tends to settle in the surface and it's not as grippy as you want. Our poly bead actually floats to the surface and makes it more grippy. Think of like 120 grit sandpaper. So I would recommend Easy Dex. One thing I always recommend when pushing a customer towards Easy Dex, this is so high in solids because we actually add a ton of solids to it. We add a ton of poly bead. It's almost 50% poly bead. With that, there's a tendency of over applying it. A lot of applicators go, well, the thicker I make it, the grippier it is. It's not true. It's actually the opposite. And you wind up causing other problems. One way to prevent over application, or if you do over apply it, always use Easy Epoxy Performance Enhancer in Easy Dex. Easy Epoxy Performance Enhancer helps it cure through. So whenever you're using a high solids product, what happens is the outside skins first and locks in the solvent, and then your normal dry time goes from 8 hours to 2 days or a week if you really over apply it. The addition of Easy Epoxy Performance Enhancer really limits that exposure. It makes it more difficult to over apply, but also helps it cure throughout. It turns it from a single component product into a two-part. You're now basically relying on a catalyzed cure instead of a moisture cure. A lot more reliable, a lot more consistent. If you're going to buy Easy Epoxy Performance Enhancer and add it to Easy Dex, 6 capfuls to a quart. That's the mixing ratio. 6 capfuls to a quart. Okay? So Easy Dex as the paint for a boat floor. John from Brooklyn, New York. His question was, do you have a bottom paint that gives me more flexibility with paint dates and launch dates? It'd be nice not to have to wait 16 to 30 days for painting. That's a question we get on a regular basis, John. And I responded back to you and I gave you a couple options. Just in terms of technology, it sounds like you're using an inexpensive single season paint. Probably works great where you are for a season, but then you have to recoat every year. And you also have limitations with launch times. If you use any of our multi-season ablative bottom paints, so if that is our Hydrocoat, if it's our new Odyssey HD, if it's our Ultimas, SR60, SR40, if it's our Vivid or Black Widow, all those products are multi-season, meaning you could paint today and launch a year from now and have no issues whatsoever. You can come in and out of the water without losing effectiveness. Super versatile paint. Most of the time when you're buying a single season paint, it costs you $125. And you got to buy it every year and apply it every year. Well, Odyssey right now is on sale at most retailers for $189.99. Hydrocoat, you can pick it up for around the same price. For $50, $60 more, you've now moved into a product with a higher copper content. Most multi-season ablatives are at least 40% copper. Most single-season products are 25% copper. You don't have to paint every year. So you're really saving yourself a lot of money year over year. So I strongly urge you to consider a multi-season ablative bottom paint. That's the way to go. One of the questions in here was specific to sales or rebates. Historically, in years past, we've always run a rebate on Hydrocoat. And we got a lot of questions, hey, is there a rebate on Hydrocoat this year? The answer is no. Couple reasons. The most important reason is we really want to get Odyssey HD into as many hands as possible this year. One of those ways is obviously offering amazing technology at a really aggressive price point with a rebate. In regards to sales on specifically Hydrocoat or rebates on Hydrocoat, there's a lot of retailers right now all over the country that are offering really aggressive pricing on Hydrocoat right now. Really more aggressive than we have in the past, or they have in the past with the rebate. So shop around, plenty of folks selling Hydrocoat. You'll always find a good deal on Hydrocoat. This year, specifically in regards to rebates, Odyssey HD is the product we're running a rebate on. $10 per gallon. The rebate information's on our website. It's also on all of our retailers' websites. You buy a gallon, you get a $10 rebate. There's also a lot of retailers around the country right now that are running a promo. Buy a gallon of Odyssey HD and receive a kit of Easy Tex for free, or receive a Prop Coat barnacle barrier for free. Reach out to your retailers. Again, a lot of them out there are running that promotion. They'd be happy to work with you. $189.95 plus $10 rebate brings you down to under $180. Plus, there's a lot of folks running a $30 free product, either the Easy Tex or the Prop Coat. So, tons of deals to be had out there. So that was another question I had regarding rebates and sales. So that takes care of that. Samuel from Puerto Rico. My area of navigation is the Caribbean. I'm inclined to use Trinidad for my 1996 Catalina 32. What components do you recommend as a primer or some additional product to do good work? Sam, great question. I followed back up with you a few days ago because I needed more clarity on your question. He's not having detachment anywhere. He thought he needed a primer between existing bottom paint and new bottom paint because he's just unfamiliar with the coating process. I explained to him no primer or no tie coat is involved. He's using Ultima SR60 now. He just wants to apply SR60 again. Pressure wash, scuff sand, clean residue, and apply SR60 again. And he was very happy with that response, so that took care of that question. George from Lake Ontario. I purchased a sailboat with VC17 for the bottom paint. Most of it is wearing off. I could see a white hull of maybe 50%. I plan to use Hydrocoat Eco to paint the bottom. Do I need to remove the VC17, or can I just sand the hull enough to rough up the hull and the VC17 that is there? George, excellent question. We get that question a lot. There's this misconception in the marketplace that you can't apply anything over VC17 or SR21 or West Marine's FW21. That was true 20 years ago. Technology on bottom paint has come so far. Any Pettit water-based bottom paint can be applied over VC17 or SR21 or FW21. No problem at all. Scuff it with 80 grit. Obviously, when you're scuffing it, you're going to create sanding residue. Remove that sanding residue and apply any of our water-based paints. Neptune HRT or any one of the 3 Hydrocoats. Great question. Duke from the Great Lakes. My sailboat was painted with Vivid bottom paint. What prep, if any, is needed to apply Vivid over a small keel that has repairs using West System epoxy? Another really popular question, Duke. Thanks for asking it. Whenever you're applying West System epoxy, it creates amine blush. We talked about amine blush last week during our epoxy demos. You have to remove that amine blush. There's a couple ways to do that. No, sanding does not remove amine blush. It just grinds it in, just like mold release wax. You will just grind that mold release, or in this case, amine blush, into the surface. 2 remedies for amine blush. Ammonia and water, 10 parts water, 1 part ammonia, Scotch-Brite pad. Or our 92 Bio Blue. 92 Bio Blue, Scotch-Brite pad will remove the amine blush. Once you have the amine blush removed, sand it with 80 grit, and then you could apply Vivid. So that answers your question. How do I prep for Vivid over West System epoxy? Remove the amine blush, sand it, and paint. I see we're going over here in time. I'll answer a few more questions. Again, I appreciate all of you for participating. We went over a lot of stuff with Pettit Protect, went over a lot of stuff with Rustlok today. Again, for next week, we're going to go over varnishes and wood treatments. I'll answer a couple more questions here, and then we'll hop off. One of the questions that was asked a lot was, I don't have access to Facebook or Facebook Live. How do I see my answer or my question being answered? YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Pettit Paint, for Pettit Paint. Week 1, week 2 are now up on YouTube. I will download this. I'll get this on YouTube. It'll be up there late this afternoon. But all these questions and demos are going to be both on Facebook Live and on our YouTube page. So that answers that question. The first question that was on the feed here today was, how do I paint teak trim? Teak trim is not tricky, but there is a lot of prep involved. First thing, if it's ever been treated with a teak oil, you have to remove that teak oil. It's a difficult process, and there's really no way to ever tell if you have all that teak oil removed. Take 120 brushing thinner and soak rags with it. Let the soaked rag sit on the teak, let it try to pull out as much teak oil as possible. You can then come back, scuff it again with the 120 and a Scotch-Brite pad to try to take that teak oil out, and do your best getting that teak oil out. If it's never been treated with teak oil before, makes your life a lot easier. You don't have to go through that step. You want to sand the teak 120, 150, 240, depends on the wood grain. If it's tight, if it's old, if it's really weathered, obviously you're going to have to sand it harder to get back smooth and flush. Apply 1 coat of our Easy Wood Sealer 2018. Let that really deeply penetrate the teak. Come back, scuff it. If there's no mill thickness left because it really soaked in, apply another coat of Easy Wood Sealer 2018. You want to apply enough Easy Wood Sealer that at some point there is mill thickness coming above the wood grain. You then want to apply your Easy Epoxy. It seemed like the question was specific to painting over top of it. Apply the Easy Wood Sealer, scuff it back, create physical anchor pattern, either a Scotch-Brite pad or 220 grit, and apply your coats of Easy Epoxy. You're probably going to have to apply a couple of coats, 2-3 coats of Easy Epoxy, and that's how you paint over teak. If your question was more specific to how do I varnish over teak, same prep. Instead of using Easy Epoxy, use something like Flagship High Build Varnish over the Easy Wood Sealer. Put 4 to 6 coats on top. It'll look like glass. Great system. We'll answer a couple more questions here. I have 8 half-inch drilled holes on the hull of my boat below the waterline. What should I use to repair? I also need to repaint with anti-fouling paint. Matt, I see you're on the Narragansett Bay. Easy Tex is a wonderful product for filling those holes. It's a true epoxy repair. It's a 1-to-1 mix ratio. Mix it up on a pallet, apply it in those holes, let it cure, come back, sand it flush, and then apply the anti-fouling paint right over the top. It's as simple as that. You don't need to get involved with fiberglass. You don't need to get involved with mesh. If there are little holes, fill it with an epoxy filler like Easy Tex. Sand it back, flush, and paint. That's how you fix those holes. This one's easy. Manny, what's the best temperature to apply bottom paint and prop coat? Prop coat's a little bit different from bottom paint. You can apply this down to a colder temperature, 20, 30 degrees, no problem. When it comes to bottom paint, substrate temperature, again, checking with a infrared thermometer, 50 degrees on substrate temperature. It's got to be 50. For barrier coat, for bottom paint, topside paint, you need at least 50 degrees. Let's wrap it up here. We'll do one more question. These were both addressed earlier. Here we go. John, Raritan Bay, New Jersey, also boats on the Chesapeake. I took delivery of our new Catalina 425. What's the best product to use as initial barrier coat and bottom paint? How many coats of each? Wonderful question. Raritan Bay in New Jersey. I'm a Jersey guy. I'm about an hour north of the Jersey Shore. One product we really like on the Jersey Shore is Odyssey HD. A couple reasons. Raritan Bay specifically doesn't have a whole lot of soft growth. It doesn't have a lot of algae. It doesn't have a lot of slime. Therefore, you don't need to really upgrade to a dual biocide paint. Sure, are they available? Absolutely. If your boating budget allows it, wonderful. Upgrade to SR60. But if you're your typical boater in New Jersey, Odyssey HD is a wonderful product. 45% copper, fast dry technology. You can put 2 coats on in a day and paint. You can paint 2 coats in a day and launch. Again, you can pick it up for around 190 bucks a gallon. There's a $10 rebate. So in terms of paint, go with Odyssey HD. Excuse me. In terms of barrier coat, we talked about this earlier. Prep with BioBlue, sand with 80 grit, 2 coats of Pettit Protect. I always recommend a intermediate coat. Some people call it an indicator coat. I call it a signal coat. If you're going to put a black bottom or a blue bottom on your Catalina, put an inexpensive bottom paint over the barrier coat. So 2 coats of barrier coat. Apply 1 coat of a product like Unipoxy HRT. If you want a black Odyssey finish, use a red Unipoxy HRT, so when the black Odyssey HD wears through to the red, you know it's time to recoat. That also tells you, or gives you an indication, if you don't see the red, don't apply more bottom paint. One of the things we see in the Northeast all the time is a lot of people use a multi-season bottom paint and paint every year. 10 years down the road, they're going, oh, I used an ablative, how come it's starting to flake off? Well, because there's so much bottom paint built up and you haven't wore through it that now you're accumulating mill thickness. So 2 coats barrier coat, 1 coat Unipoxy HRT in red, and then 2 coats of Odyssey HD in black. Do not reapply the Odyssey HD in black until you start seeing that red. It might be this year if you use the boat a lot. Could be 2 years, it could be 3 years down the road. Depends on how much you use the boat. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap up for today. Thank you all for joining. Again, next week we'll be doing wood finishes. We'll be talking about our varnishes, the difference between the varnishes. We're going to talk about application tools for varnishes. We're going to talk about painting over woods and things like that. So next week, hands-on demos again like we did last week with the epoxies. Same time, I'm going to have boards laid out with the finishes on there so you can see the different finishes. If you, I'm talking to you folks on Facebook, but if you have a friend that's not on Facebook, you can send them over to our YouTube page and they could see these videos. I hope they're helpful to you. With that being said, thank you again. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Wash your hands. Wear your masks when you're going out. We do have some states opening back up for boating, which is a really great thing. The tri-state area opened up last weekend. We're hoping to get other states opened up again here shortly. So boating's back. We just need the weather to cooperate a little bit with us. Up here in the Northeast, we've had some crummy weather for the last week. Next week it looks better. So stay positive out there, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week.